Hello everyone. I thought it would be important at this stage of the EPQ to make a little bit of a supervisor guidance video as we approach the mid-project review. A reminder that students should now have completed the planning review stage of the EPQ. Firstly, just to remind you that on SharePoint, if you search for the EPQ site, you will find all the materials that I use in the Taught Skills program. That Taught Skills program is about 38 hours at the moment. There are two sections to the SharePoint that are of interest to you. Here is the EPQ lesson material, and it looks like that on this icon. Perhaps more important to you, and you can direct the students here, is the fact that I have over 400 EPQ student reports, which are organized into folders in order of subject. So that can be a real wealth of material for students to look at to get ideas for the structuring of their EPQ report. Now, a few supervisors have been saying to me recently they can't find their student. If that's the case, it's because you're on the wrong course. If you go into Project Q, remember to sign in using your 365 password. If you go to the top right of the screen, you will see it says Switch Course. And then you will have to choose this course over here, Desk EPQ Completion 2023. Set it as your default, and then automatically you will see your student from this particular cohort. Now on Project Q, students should, as I say, have finished the planning review. Just wanted to remind you that at this point they should have a detailed project plan in the form of something like a Gantt chart, a table, a calendar, or using a piece of software such as Notion or Evernote. They need to have very clear aims and objectives. They need SMART targets. And in terms of the SMART target, the most important element would be the time-bound element of it. We're looking to finish the whole project in early November of this year. So students need to have chunked and broken down the project into achievable sections. And they need to include this and hand this in as part of their project. Now, just to remind you about the mark scheme, one of the major sources of the mark scheme is the production log. Please can I remind you to tell the students to be really detailed, to show management and planning skills, to talk about how they find their sources and resources, and most of all, to talk about their problem solving, their decision making, their creative problem solving strategies. Finally, AO4 is the critical review, where they look at their performance, learn from it, and move on to different things. It's really important that they write to the examiner and give them enough information and detail so that they can really give an insight into the shape and the direction of the project. Now, in terms of the project plan, it's really important that they've discussed this with you, because when it comes to the summary and comments from the supervisor, this is an important element of the assessment. And the examiners are looking to make sure that there's a good and productive dialogue between student and supervisor. It's very important that then students fill in this section here, modifications I have made. It's so important that, again, that I'll just go back to the mark scheme, that they talk about the problem solving, the development and realization of their project, how they arrived at decisions, what were their strategies, why did they make the changes that they did, and this should be dealt with in a great deal of detail if they want to get a decent grade. And now moving on to the mid-project review. This is so important because, as I say, it is the final title. Whether it's an artifactual report, after this is locked, students are not permitted to change. So one of the key things that I'm doing in the lessons, and you can help me in your meetings with your tutees, your supervisees, is to revisit the research question and to make sure that they have the correct question, a correction which is answerable. If not, they need to think to themselves, should they be including some more limiting factors? And by limiting factors, I mean narrowing down the research question further so that the question becomes much more answerable, that it is specific and narrow, And the kind of limiting factors that I'm talking about are things like place, perhaps setting it in the United States, time, setting it within a date period of time, a specific version. If they're doing cancer, they could do like lymphoma or a particular kind of cancer. And the reason why they do this is to make the question much more answerable. Likewise, with artifacts, we want students to revisit the purpose and the success criteria that they're using for their artifact and to decide that they can lock this down. Let me remind you that it's your job to click and say yes and sign off with a date. And once that is done, it's a crucial moment in the EPQ when we can have no more changes. Just a little bit of a plan for the rest of the term, because I think that this is interesting to you. Students have just finished research ethics. So if students are doing any kind of interview or human research element, they should have a plain language statement. They have to have full ethical clearance from me, and that's something that you could discuss with them. This week we're working on the EPQ report structure. On my YouTube channel, you'll find a video that I've made for the students, and they can begin to plan the structure. Now, I'm just talking about a simple global plan at this particular stage. We're going to move on to have a planning lesson. And then in week 23, I'm asking the students to have a quick 5-minute presentation showing that they're thinking about the structure of their project. And that will be both for report-based EPQs and artifacts. And then in the final week, we're going to be starting looking at introduction writing. So we really are at the point now where the students are finishing the research phase and they're moving on to the production phase of the EPQ. Now, what to look for as a supervisor? Well, one of the things that you could look for is an argument table. I use this a great deal with report students to make sure that they have an argument at the core of their EPQ. The most common mistake students make is to chuck loads of information at us to make the report descriptive. An argument table where they have arguments for and against is a very good way to make sure that at the center of the EPQ there is a genuine debate. Also, as I said before, consider changing the research question. You're not there to tell them what this research question could be, but you could act as a kind of Socratic probe, saying, is that answerable, etc. You could also ask them about their source evaluation table and their note-taking. They should be doing this as they go along. They should be keeping their citations, and by this stage they should have a very detailed reference list. They should have read at least, say, 10, 15, maybe 20 articles by now. The project plan, as I said before, is the completion date is early November. So they need that project planning in place. They should be working on this, having a clear report and a clear artifact plan. Introduction sets the argument in a report, in an EPQ report. It sets up the debate. It makes sure that it's not going to be a descriptive piece. And the introduction and artifact report sets out a very clear purpose and research base for the artifacts. So they have different functions. And then finally, just to remind you, I've got a YouTube channel. I'll put the address down here. I have a video for every section of the report. The overall report, the introduction, paragraph level, the main body, and concluding the report. Shockingly, I've spelt that wrong, but I've done this in a hurry. I also have a separate video for the artifact report. Thanks so much for all of the work that you're doing on this. It is very much appreciated. I really felt it was important that at this time that you begin to see the students are moving from the research phase into the production phase, and they should now go full tilt into planning and writing. Thank you for your support. It's very much appreciated.